or greater. So I'll pass it over to Megan, who's going to demo how to set this up, how to set up a forecast in Creatio.
All right, thanks, Anjum. Looks like I need you to stop screen sharing and then I'll be able to start mine. All right, so I've got my Creatio site here already set up and ready to go. And so I'm just going to go ahead and go into the forecast section here. I do have one forecast that we'll come back to in a second that I wanted to be able to demonstrate for you a couple of things that kind of take time to occur over time. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and create a new forecast. So I'm going to click the plus button here to say that I want to add a new forecast. One of the really unique things about forecasting in Creatio is you have the ability to forecast on any data in your system. So it's not limited only to your kind of traditional forecasting data like your sales, your opportunities, or your orders, or both. You have the ability to use any of the data you've got in Creatio. As Anjum said, the first thing you're going to do here is pick the period and then what level we want to forecast at. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a couple of forecasts just as a starting point here so we can kind of see how some of these different settings are represented in the outcome. So I'm going to create a contacts by month. Let's call this team by month. And so I'll do a by month period here. And both of my forecasts, at least as a starting point today, are going to be based on contacts, which just means that I want my forecast to be by person. I want to see how person A is doing versus person B in my forecast. And for this one, I'm going to skip setting up the hierarchy. We'll do that on our secondary one. So once I set up the basics here, I give my forecast a name, a period, and then the entity in the hierarchy. I can go ahead and create my forecast. And I can start to add people into my forecast, or in this case, people, because my object was contacts, but whatever my object may have been. So I'm going to find all of our company people and select all of those people to add to my forecast. And so now I've got my forecast, at least the basic setup here. I've got my team all available to see their forecasting data. And I've got different time periods for each month because I selected the monthly time period. If instead I were to set up a quarterly time period, and in the interest of time and not creating so many different forecasts, I'm going to go ahead and show you the hierarchy now too. So I'm going to group my contacts by department that they work in. And as Anjum said, you can have, I think it's 10 levels of hierarchy here. So you can go pretty deep in the hierarchy if you need to. I've not really seen too many use cases for going more than a couple, but functionality is there if you need it. And so we're going to have a couple of differences here once I get my people added. I'll just put all of the people in here again. So difference number one is we now have this hierarchy going on here. And so we've got our department level first, and then the people within each department based on the department field in the contact profile, because that's the field that I chose to use for my hierarchy. And then obviously our second difference is we've got quarterly time periods instead of monthly time periods. So I only have 4 periods for the year instead of 12. Once we've got that set up, we can then start to think about what data we want to see in our forecast. So as a starting point, Creatio has only added a single column here, an expected column. And this column is set up as an editable column type. The idea here is that if I had some sort of a goal I wanted to track, I could click into each person and assign them whatever their goal was for whatever I'm going to measure in this forecast. I'm going to do sales numbers, like sales dollar values in this forecast. So whatever my sales goal per quarter is, it's probably more than $5,000. I could assign that goal to each person, and it could be the same goal for everybody, but obviously, as you could see, it could also be a different goal per person. So if I've got, people who've got higher goals or lower goals, as the case might be, I can just go ahead and enter those goals across the line as I move down my list here per person. It is going to automatically total those for me at my hierarchy level, so I can see the total expected value for everyone in this not assigned department role. And then I could go through my, salespeople and give them all goals. And we would see that total happening here as well. And obviously I'd probably go through and set goals for each quarter. If I'm doing a quarterly forecast, these, again, they could be the same goal quarter after quarter, or if you have a seasonal business where there's more business at certain times of the year, maybe these goals are lower in certain quarters and higher in other quarters. You have the ability to set that as needed because it's just an editable field where you can assign any value you want. And again, you can name this also anything you want. So it defaulted this name expected, but I could call this my goal if I wanted. And I don't have to have an editable goal column either. I could just remove that column if that doesn't apply to my particular goal or purpose, I guess I should say, to use another word, my particular purpose in creating this forecast. So the editable column is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's just like we just saw, you can type in any value you want. Other than a goal, that's probably the main reason you'd use an editable column in your forecast. And so most of your other columns are probably going to be either a formula or a value from an object, and probably value from object is slightly more frequently used. So let's start with that one. A value from an object allows you to pull in the data or total up the data for some Creatio data point. So how many opportunities does this person have, or what is the total dollars on those opportunities? And again, the nice thing about Creatio's forecasting is it's flexible. It doesn't have to be opportunities, although that's what I'm going to use here. It could be orders if you're using orders in Creatio, or invoices. It could be how many activities have they had. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a sales data point. If you've got sales and service licenses, for example, you could actually do some sort of forecast around how many closed cases someone has. It's sort of a weird application of forecasting, but this tool, it's really a reporting tool, is available with any of the data you've got in Creatio. So let's do my total sold calculation here. So this is I'm going to use from opportunities, although again, you could do orders or invoices if you've got data there that better reflects that. And you can put conditions in here. So I only want my closed won opportunities. And so I'm going to put my stage as closed won. This is using the standard filtering capabilities within Creatio. So, you can add additional conditions in here as needed. It's also going to need to know, how does it take an opportunity and decide which time period it falls into? So what date field on the opportunity am I using to assign it to first quarter versus second quarter versus third quarter? And so this is going to give me just a list of my date fields, and I'll use the closed on date here. Then I can decide what calculation I want. Do I want a count, a total, or an average? So I'll do the total. And I'm going to do the total of the opportunity amount. Any of my numeric data fields are going to be available here to pick. And so you can select what field you want. If you want to apply some sort of a percentage calculation to that, like I only want 70% of the opportunity amount for this particular column in my forecast, you can do that. I'm not going to mess with that here. I just want to know what's been won. And then you also need to say, how do I take my opportunity and decide which person it's assigned to? So what field on my opportunity is going to link that to a person? I'll go ahead and use the owner field for that. And so I can go ahead and save that. When I first add my new column to my forecast, it's going to all show zeros because it has not yet been calculated. So if I want to see how that looks, I can go ahead and click the calculate button. It will take a minute or so to go ahead and do that calculation. This one should be pretty fast. I don't have a ton of data in here for it to calculate with. And then we'll see the status here at the top. We'll update in a moment or two when it's done calculating, and then we'll see the numbers refresh as well. So until it's done that, don't be alarmed if you see all zeros when you add a new column. That's what you should expect up until that first initial calculation. And looks like there it goes. So we can see that it's now been calculated. So again, we see that status change. We're back to having a calculate button we can click to recalculate. It will tell us the next time it's going to automatically calculate would be 6 hours from now. And then we can see the numbers that have been calculated for us. And we can add multiple columns here. We're not limited to a certain number of columns in our forecast. So we could also do, for example, right next to that, what's currently in each person's pipeline. So we can basically just repeat that column, only we're going to do their open opportunities. So we'll do the opportunity section again. And this time our stage filter is going to be that it's not won or lost. We'll still use the closed on date, which is that projected close date as our date. We'll still use our total dollars as our calculation here. And then we'll use our owner as our contact link again. And so again, rather than sitting here watching it calculate over and over again, we'll wait till we're done with a few more things and we'll calculate again. But we'll see once we do that, then we'll start to see what's in the pipeline for each person for each quarter as well. Then we can start to do calculations using these values. So for example, I could do a formula to add up what's already been sold plus what's currently in the pipeline. So this would be like my total possible sales. I can add up from those values, those two columns that I've selected. So I can go ahead and choose whether or not I want to, what sort of math I want to do, just, basic operations here. Do I want to calculate totals for the groups here? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And so it will then go ahead and add up those two values for me to get my total possible sales. Or I could do something like a percentage. I want to know what percentage of the goal has been achieved. I could do a formula to say take the total sold divided by the goal times 100. And I can see, for example, that the sales team has reached 5% of its goal. So let's go ahead and calculate this one more time. So we get those open opportunity numbers filled in. That was really fast that time. All right. So here again, we can see it's adding up any of those values for us. See if I can find one that's got both. There's not a ton of data in this demo site, as you can probably tell looking at this information. But you can see sometimes we've got some open opportunities and sometimes we've got some sold opportunities. And again, it's going to total those up and then do the percentage calculation for me. So let's talk about a couple of other things we can do at this point. One thing we might want to do at this point is set up some automations. So if we go back into our forecast settings, we only did the general settings before, we didn't talk about automation. There's two important settings here. Let's start with the bottom one that's more self-explanatory. The automatic calculation is how often do you want it to automatically recalculate those values. So it can be every 45 minutes, it could be every hour, it could be every 10 minutes, whatever frequency is relevant for you. You can choose a time frame. And then if you only wanted to do it for certain hours of the day, like 9 to 5 or something like that, you could do that too. I'm going to just leave it all day long. So again, this is referring to the recalculation of those formula columns or those value from Creatio data columns so that it's pulling in the latest information and updating that forecast. The daily autosave function will keep a copy of what your forecast looked like on each day. So you can go back and look back at the history of that forecast and how it's changed over time. So again, you can choose what time you want that to run at. Make sure if you're doing the time either here or here, make sure you're also setting what time zone you want to be thinking about that in, because it's probably not UTC. For me, I would be wanting to think in Central Time, if I can type. So I would want to choose that. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Choose Central Time here so that the times I'm picking are in a time zone that makes sense to me. So this daily autosave is actually the reason that I left this other forecast by product forecast in here. It's because I've had that turned on for about a week here on this one. And so that gives me this additional calendar button. So when I first go into the forecast, it's showing me the current forecast. This is what the data looks like right now. But I can go back and look at, what did the forecast look like yesterday? What did the forecast look like the day before that? And so this is a really great tool if you're trying to look at how has that forecast changed over time. As the month progresses, how are your sales team updating their numbers, or what's changing with what's in their pipeline, so that you can see how that change is happening. You can just kind of look back and, look at today's versus yesterday's or a week ago's or a month ago's and see how that data has updated. But again, if you want to use that function, you need to turn on that setting to say that you want to do that autosave. So it won't do that by default. You have to specifically turn that on. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that this data does have some drill down capabilities. So if I want to see the opportunities in this case that are in this calculation, I can click on any of these value from Creatio fields columns. I can click on that number and it will show me the opportunity or opportunities that make up that particular person's calculation. So here are the 2 opportunities that Mary King has won in the second quarter. And from here, then I could drill down into each of those opportunities if I wanted to. I can also select what columns are displayed in this view. So right now it's just showing me the name and the amount, but if I want to show other data, I could go in and use the usual field selector tool to change what columns are being displayed on that view. Let's see, what else did I need to point out here? I think just probably one more thing, and then I'll do a couple more columns just to show you something else a little bit different. So Anjum had mentioned access rights. This is set up like any other record in the system. You can assign who has access to view, modify, or delete this forecast. So just like anything else, you can add additional users who have access to it by picking specific users or any of the roles that you've set up in your system. And those are set up on a forecast by forecast basis. So each tab has its own access rights, just like a dashboard or any other data in the system. Just to kind of emphasize that flexibility of not being limited only to traditional forecast sales data, let's do an activities dashboard here. So I'm still going to do this. Let's do by month, by person. And I kind of like that department hierarchy. I think it makes it a little bit cleaner to read. So we'll go ahead and do that again. And then once again, I can add my people in here. And you don't have to obviously select them all. If there were only certain people you wanted to include in your forecast, you obviously don't have to select them here. So if I didn't want to include, say, supervisor, I could just unselect them so that they're not included in my forecast. And then let's set up a goal for the number of activities I want them to have per month. And then let's set up how many activities did they actually complete. So let's do completed activities. And again, I'll do this as a value from an object. Only this time, instead of picking the opportunity section, I'll use the activity section. I'm going to filter to only the completed activities. And I'll use the activity start date to decide which period it goes into. I'm just going to count how many activities they've completed. And the person that I want to select the activity to link to would be the owner of the activity. We'll go ahead and calculate that. And then again, if we wanted to do something like a percentage of goal achieved or something, we could add that as well. Looks like we've got some activities as we move further out. So we can go ahead and see some of that data in here. If we wanted to add that percent of goal, we would do that the same way with our formula. The completed activities divided by the goal times 100. And we can see, obviously we don't have any goals assigned, so that's kind of boring, but let's say these people have a goal of 15. It will update as we assign those goals. And we can see, oh, I see. I may have misexplained in this formula. So this is saying it's only going to calculate the totals formula. We're going to do that at the individual level. So that should calculate here then. Let's see. There we go. That's what I wanted. So I can see that Megan is at 120% of her goal. Other Megan is at 40% and Mary is at 6% for this particular month. Shoot, there was one other thing I was going to point out in the middle of that and I forgot what it was. I hate that feeling. Oh, I remember what it was. If you don't want to see the full year, I don't have any data in this site for the first few months of the year, so it's kind of silly for me to start with January. You can go into your view menu here and say, I don't want to see all of the months. I only want to see these months. And it will narrow that view down. Now that's not dynamic, unfortunately. So, you know, come July, when I want to start to see the next few months of the year, I'm going to have to go back into my view and select different months. But it is a quick and easy way to just kind of narrow down what you're looking at, especially if you are doing those monthly periods where looking at the whole year is just an awful lot of scrolling a lot of times. It's an easy way to narrow down the scope of what you're looking at and just kind of hone in on the time period you care about. And it makes it a lot easier to also see this total at the end, which before was so far over on our screen, we weren't even seeing it.